Okay, that's our recovery services vault. And then if I look into the backup section under the essentials, you will see if any backups have occurred in the last 24 hours, what is the backup pre-check status for all your Azure virtual machines, any backup items that have happened, basically the statistics of your Azure backup. For now, to demonstrate the Azure backup, I've created a virtual machine in Azure, just simulating an environment of an on-premise infrastructure. So I've already copied the Mars agent that we downloaded earlier, and I'm ready to install it. So I'm going to double click on it and then let it do its job, like extracting files and whatever it got to do. So this installer here provides a series of messages as it extracts, installs, and registers the recovery services agent. Let's walk through this. Now, this is the default location, C program files, and I'm going to keep it like that. If I have any proxy settings on my enterprise, you can select that and then click next. Do you want to opt in for any Microsoft updates? At this point, I'll just select I do not want to use Microsoft updates and then move on further. And finally, click on install. This will take a minute to get that product installed. Okay, looks like that's installed. So let's proceed to register our Azure backup in the Recovery Services Vault in Azure. So I'm going to click on proceed to registration. And this is where I got to point my vault credentials. So I'll browse to my desktop. That's where my file is. Okay, and then click on open, next, and then finish through this wizard as well. One thing to keep in mind that you got to have a passphrase. This is required for you to register to the Azure Recovery Services Vault. You also have the option to generate a passphrase for you and then save it to a secure location. We'll keep it under the C drive, create a new folder if that's required, but make sure that it is saved somewhere. Okay, so I've named the folder as passphrase. I'll click on OK. That's where my credentials will get stored and finish. That's it, you're done. The agent is now installed on your machine. It would also be registered in the vault. So you're now ready to configure and schedule your backups. I'll wait for this registration to complete. And once this is done, we'll launch the Microsoft Azure Recovery Services agent and then go through the steps to configure and schedule your backup. Looks like that's done. So I'll click on close and then launch the Microsoft Azure backup. And now this is where you gotta go and schedule the backups. So when you click on schedule backup, you will have the options to select whether you want a differential backup or a full backup or a system state backup of the machine. Okay, so let's go through that. Now you can select the items that you want to backup, click on add items, and then just for demonstration purposes, I'll select the passphrase folder. It's just for demonstration, but then in real time, you will be selecting probably the file server data, your intellectual property that you want to take a backup of, things like that. So click on OK. Keep in mind that you also have the option to exclude something from the backups. Well, you can add an exclusion and say, hey, I don't want to take a backup of a particular file or a particular folder. You can do that. So I will ignore that for a minute and then click next. Now, when do you want to schedule your backup? Is it daily or weekly? If it is daily, at what time do you want to take a backup? You're allowed to take a backup of maximum 3 times in a day. So you can select 3 different schedules from these drop-down menus. At this point, I'll leave it as 9 p.m. for the day and click on next. Then I've got the retention policies. What should be the retention policies? So you can now specify the retention policy for the backup copy of your files and folders. So you got weekly retention, monthly retention, and yearly retention as well. Keep in mind that you got the modify options. These are not static, but you can definitely modify these values. I'll leave these as default and click on next. Now you got few important options here. How do you want to back up your data? Should they be copied automatically over the internet? Or do you want to create a staging location first and then have the backup done here, and then at a particular time it can then be copied over to a storage account and then to a recovery services vault? So if you got bandwidth issues, or if this backup is happening at production hours and you do not want to choke the network traffic in your organization, well then offline backup will be best for you. In this case, I will just choose the first option, which is automatically take the backup over the network, and then click next. Finally, you get a summary of all the options that you have chosen during this wizard, right? So if you're happy with this, satisfied with these values that you've selected, all we got to do is click on finish. There you go, that's done. So all you got to do is close this wizard. Since you have scheduled the backup now, the backup will be triggered at 9 p.m. But then if you want to trigger a backup right now, well, there's an option here to back it up right now. So click on that and walk you through the wizard. Well, you have the options to choose whether you want to back up files and folders or the system state. I'll leave this option as files and folders. Click on next, and then you can specify the date till which you want to retain the backup. Yeah, this is also a retention period that is specified for the backup that you are triggering right now. Well, I'll leave the date as it is and click on next. You get a summary of that, and then I'll click on backup. It may take some time for the backup to happen depending on the amount of data that you have chosen, because it then has to get transferred to our internet-based cloud backup as well. Okay, so looks like that is completed. I'll click on close to get rid of this. And now let's navigate to the Azure portal to see if we have this backup in our recovery services vault. Okay, so I'll minimize this. And then if I navigate to my recovery services vault, let me collapse this so we get a better view. What you see is there is one backup item now. You click on it further, then you will see that the backup is happening from an Azure backup agent. So for all your on-premise workstations or on-premise servers, you will have the Azure Backup Agent installed, and then you will see the number of agents installed on each server. If it is an Azure virtual machine, you will see that here. But you may be asking, now this virtual machine on which we have installed the Mars agent is an Azure virtual machine. Why don't we see a number here? Well, that is because we installed the agent. Whenever you install an agent, you will see the number 1. Usually you install the Mars agent on an on-premise infrastructure or probably in a different cloud. In this case, just to simulate an environment, we created a virtual machine in Azure and then installed the Mars agent. Let's go back to the server now and then try to restore a particular file. So let's say my file or a folder is getting deleted from the C drive. So I will navigate to the C drive and then simulate as if the file is getting accidentally deleted. In fact, I'll go ahead and delete the whole folder from here and see how we can restore it from Azure. Now that the data is in Azure, but then the agent is installed on the server, I can restore it or recover it from the Microsoft Azure Backup Agent installed on the server. To recover it, I just gotta click on the recover data option and then walk through the wizard. That's all. So that's how simple it is. Okay, so that's the recover data wizard, and you got the options to restore it on this server or on another server. I'll click on next now. Recovery mode. Do you want individual files and folders to be restored? Is it a volume restore or a system state restore? The kind of backup that we have taken is an individual files and folders, so I will leave it as it is. But then in your case, it may be a different ballgame altogether. So you may want to choose a volume or a system state depending on what kind of backup you have chosen, right? So now I'll click on next. Okay, now where do you want to restore it? Okay, now it is looking around the C drive and then giving me the restore points. Now it looks like the backup was taken on 23rd. I'll leave it as it is and then say mount it. Okay, I got the recovery volume as an E drive. So I have the option to either browse through it or unmount it. Well, I don't want to unmount it right now because I want to go to that E drive and see how that looks. So I'll click on browse and then click on the Explorer. And there you go, I've got a new drive here with the folder that was backed up. Now I can double click on it and I've got all my files that were there inside the folder. Now I can copy this and then paste it into the original location which got accidentally deleted. Now in this lesson we looked at how you can install the Mars agent on your server and then schedule the backups, initiate the backups, and also recover the files using the Microsoft Azure Backup Agent, also called as an Mars agent. In the upcoming lessons, let's take a look at Azure Site Recovery scenarios.